Welcome to my budget deck channel, where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if that sounds right up your street, then maybe consider leaving a little subscribe. Today I actually had a look at Swordsoul, not because I really wanted to make this deck, but mainly because I had all the materials for this deck from opening the packs for my punk deck, which you can also check out on my channel. But I have to say, after trying it out, making like not a competitive version, but it's actually quite good. I had a lot of fun with this deck because it is quite consistent. There are quite a few cards you can splash in here, and it is fun to play, I have to say. I don't know if that's because of the splashed in Tenyi engine or if that's because of the Swordsoul, but it feels nice playing a deck that actually does something for a change, and Swordsoul is quite a strong deck in general. Obviously there's a lot more competitive variants you can play with than this specific one, but this one is cheap, as you can see in the main deck, and also the extra deck isn't too expensive, and I'll go over the cards right now. I'll start out with the extra deck because that's where the most expensive cards are, and I'll explain if you actually need them or what you could cut. Starting with one card that you can cut if you want to, but this card is actually quite nice. It works quite well with certain cards in your deck, like Wyrm, for example, because it can summon from deck, and it's a Wyrm card, so in general it's nice. Also, you can go into it with your Tenyi plus your level 6 monsters, so that's why I run at least 2 Atara. You don't have to play it if it's a super rare you don't want to invest to, if you don't really care about Yang Zings otherwise, or Wyrm decks in general, then leave this card out, play any other kind of level 7 cards if you want to. Cyframe Lord Zeta comes into mind. Other than that, yeah, it's a neat card that can help you go in second. If you want to have some kind of payoff for Wyrm as well, you probably have to invest even more into certain linked monsters right now. The only kind of thing you'd be going into is Berserker of the Tenyi, or certain other kind of synchro combos, and sometimes tokens of Wyrm can be quite nice for your Tenyi stuff. But other than that, don't have to run it, but I feel like it is not a terrible card. Level 8 monster, cheap ones, this is the one that you can go for. Every other one is kind of terrible. Other cards you can go for if you want to spend a bit more resources on it. Scrap Dragon works okay. Scarlet Red Dragon Arcfiend is a card that in the grind game can be quite helpful. So is White Aura Whale, which you can easily go into in the whole Tenyi and Swordsoul, because they have loads of water monsters actually. Cyflame Lord Omega and the Tenyi, well, Draco Berserker of the Tenyi is also considerably doing well in this deck, but yeah, they're not the cheapest, so I decided to include at least one more level 8. You run 2 other ones that are actually good, and if you run out of resource and you have to make another one because, well, sometimes you need damage on board, then this card, I guess, is the way to go if you want to stay on budget. One that I would definitely say is worth running a lot more than Yazi would be is Baxia, because this card is very good in the grind game. You don't start off with it, obviously. I mean, you can for certain crazy combos, but this is not what this specific deck does. This one would be quite nice in the grind game. You can get stuff back from your graveyard, you can pop your tokens, you can pop your Tenyi stuff, you can easily go into this card. Most of your monsters have different attributes, so you can actually shuffle a lot of cards back, which is quite nice. With a lot of cards, I mean 2, but that should not be a problem. So this card actually does a lot going second, and it's a Wyrm monster, so this works with certain other cards as well that lock you into Wyrms, which I think is only Tenyi Spirit, but I'm not 100% sure right this second. Swordsoul Grandmaster, don't even try to pronounce this one. In the level 8 one is actually quite a neat card. You can search a Swordsoul card, which can be very, very helpful. You run lots of them, and lots of them do lots of different things. Helps you easily get into like a level 10 synchro as well if you search the right cards. You can search your trap card, you can search all kinds of things, and you can search your spell card that can search you Arch Nemesis Protos. Didn't include the card because I think in the TCG this card is banned, and I don't really want to include cards that might get hit. Yeah, some Swordsoul cards might get hit, but it's easier to replace them than if your deck basically relies on this card being a massive powerhouse and the rest is just decoration, and this card is a massive powerhouse if you get it out, especially in certain scenarios. So I felt like not including it, but definitely mentioning it. If you want to add another very, very, very strong card, you can easily play this card over like one Swordsoul of this one, for example, and one of this is absolutely fine because it's easily searchable. I ran one Baron de Fleur. You do not have to, but this card is actually an ultra rare as much as the Swordsoul one is, but it is a lot better than the Swordsoul one. There's another level 10 Swordsoul, but we don't have it yet. I think they would be comparable if you actually would have the other one. I think it's the fire one, but since we don't have it, Baron de Fleur is actually kind of better if you want to run one level 10 monster in this deck, which I feel like they're so easy to make, so I did want to run two. But if you don't want to spend an ultra rare on either of those cards, then just go for one of them. I would say Baron over the Swordsoul card, even though the Swordsoul is quite nice if you get it off in combination with your level 8. But then again, it's actually not amazing, but I still liked it and I pulled it, so I wanted to include it. You can see you already can cut certain expenses in this deck without harming the deck too much. And the rest of the extra deck is basically just Tenyi stuff. You don't have to run Shaman, but it is a discard, but you have to be aware of the condition of the end, which is if you actually special summon a Wyrm monster, then you can, for the rest of this turn, not activate effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck, except Tenyi monsters. Would have been nice if it was Wyrm monsters, but it's not. So make sure before you go into this, maybe you use the effect of your level 8 Synchro then. Other than that, it is helpful for discarding cards in your hand, which some of them have have graveyard effects, which I'll be talking about in a second. You one land for Incus, you don't have to craft this, you get this for free at the tutorial, I think, or one of the starter decks. So this card is pretty neat for the whole Tenyi thing, having a non-effect monster. And I run triple Berserk of the Tenyi, first of all for your trap if it gets destroyed, also climbing into it and using it as some kind of boss monster. It's neat. You could run one level link 4 Tenyi, especially for the Mirror tokens and whatnot. This card can be quite neat. You can run any other kind of link monsters as you like. You can easily put monsters on board, so link monsters are quite nice in this deck. So are Xyz monsters, rank 4 specifically. It's easy to make. Tornado Dragon even is a Wyrm, so that's quite funny. But I decided not to include them because there's not cheap ones and you don't actually need them. So I felt like it was pointless actually including them in the deck. Now to the main deck, I run double Atara. Atara is nice, but since you don't run any needle fiber combos or anything crazy, you don't really have to run it at 2, but I felt like I liked a Tenyi count between 10 and 11 monsters for certain reasons. Also, this card helps you go into Yazi, so I have it there. Plus, it can recycle your cards, your banished Wyrm monsters, not just Tenyi monsters, back to your hand. So this effect is also quite neat. I run one Ash Blossom because you basically get it for free. Most people will have one and it's a great card, so run it at 1. In terms of hand traps, obviously you can stuff this deck full of hand traps. You can cut down ratios of a lot of cards to run better hand traps than the cards would be that you'd run instead. So if you want to do this, there's probably loads of deck profiles that are telling you what hand traps to run, what's good against the meta and so on. So orientate yourself with this one and yeah, go from there. I did not include Destroy Phoenix Enforcer or this whole thing in there because I feel like if any part of this combo gets banned, then every deck profile that uses this will be void, and I don't really want this. I want this to last as long as possible. Sounds weird from a content creator side because everybody loves updating their profiles, but I like mine to actually be something that can stay. Tenyi Spirit, the water one, which I think the effect is fine, especially in conjunction with the trap card, because you actually destroy one of your Tenyi monsters if you like, and then you can destroy other cards with the effect of the water one. So I like to run it at 2 at least, could run it at 3 and cut one of the fire ones. It's nice in the Tenyi strategy, it's nice because it's a water monster, it's nice because it's a level 4, so you can do loads and loads of things with this. The other two, I'd basically only run to get the Tenyi count up and to be level 4s. This protects from targeting, can be quite nice, and this is, well, it's a gimmicky kind of card, but sometimes it matters if you have to beat over certain cards of your opponent. Problem is that this card doesn't boost your monster's attack, but actually lowers your opponent's monster's attack, which is annoying if your opponent is unaffected. If AI comes to mind, or this Antagonister kind of thing, yeah, wouldn't work on that then, but other kind of cards that you can't beat over because 3000 something is kind of the maximum you have, and they can't be destroyed and shuffled back and whatnots or targeted. This card can be helpful. Now to one of the cards that obviously most people would run at 3 because it's great, gives you a draw, lets you instantly go into your level 8 if you have the right cards in hand, which most of the time you will. Obviously it's an ultra rare. 1, I think, yes, I would definitely run it at 1. The deck works surprisingly well without even being in the deck, but at 1, since it's so searchable, and I would definitely do want to run it at 1 at least. Then Swordsoul of Taya, which is actually great, especially in the grind game. easily also puts up one of your level 8s. Also banishes a card, which can come in handy if you still have level 10 on field. Also, the effect of sending one Wyrm monster to the graveyard is actually not that bad. It can help you with the Tenyis, which is nice. It can send Myrmir to the graveyard and can send one other card that I'll be talking about in a second to the graveyard. So this card, actually kind of underrated in my opinion. Really like it, and can help you out of a pinch. Another card that is not a Wyrm monster. This is why I thought about maybe just putting it back down to 1, but it can summon you out stuff like your Swordsoul of Moye, which is super nice. It is a tuner monster. Go in second, it can special summon itself from the hand. Technically, because the problem is if your opponent has a full board, then that's easy. If your opponent only has one monster, then it kind of hinders your Tenyi playstyle a bit if you also want to have a Tenyi on board, because obviously you can't play it before that, because then you don't control only non-effect monsters, which can be problematic. But since it's a tuner, this card has its place in the deck, but it makes the deck even weaker to Ash Blossom than it already would be. So if you have Called by the Grave, a card that you can also consider running, could cut this card down to 1 if you don't want to invest into it, but it's also okay in Alba's deck, so I don't know. If you want to run it at 2, it works. If you want to run it at 1 or don't want to run it at all, it's still fine, I would say. One Giant Pearfish, it's a card that sounds strange at the start, and it's level 6, so it's a bit iffy to go into, but you have cards like your Tenyis, which you can special summon from your hand without using your normal summon. Go in second, you actually have your Ecclesia, which you also can summon. So this card actually comes in handy quite a lot. If you summon it from the graveyard by being dumped there by certain other effects, and being revived by certain other effects, this card is quite neat and can actually start your combos quite well. And specifically, since it is a level 6, you can easily go into your Synchros that are level 10. So I really like this card. You could bump it up to 2, but obviously if you draw 2 of this, can be quite problematic. But since it's a Wyrm, it actually fits into the deck style. In a budget version, why not run something that's a bit off the norm, but kind of funny, and it actually does support the deck quite a lot. Swordsoul Strategist, the Long Huan, I don't know. You can discard one Swordsoul card or Wyrm monster, which is very important, and then special summon this card from your hand and summon token. So this is a card that easily lets you go into your level 10 Synchros, which is quite nice. Also burns your opponent from 1,200 points, which is actually okay. It's not terrible. Facilitates some OTKs after the grind game. So this card I would definitely say is a 3 of. A card that you can bump down to 1 or don't even have to play at all if you don't want to is this one. It's somewhat of a hand trap technically, but you can quick effect summon it and then do stuff in the battle phase somewhat. But you can quick effect summon it in the battle phase, which is a bit annoying. Plus you have to tribute one of your monsters. Can be helpful if you want to climb into your level 10, so I run it at 2, it's searchable and whatnot, but this is one card that you could probably cut for other stuff. Myrmir, very good for certain combos. Don't have to run it, but it's actually quite neat. Plus it's a tuner monster, so this is quite nice. Tenyi Spirit Vashuda, great card. Helps you go in second, puts a monster on board, and kind of helps you go into level 8 Synchros as well, into combination with Atara. So this is actually quite a neat card to run. Decided to run triple Ashuna, which you could bump down to 2, but in a Wyrm orientated deck, I feel like this isn't too bad. Helps you with your Tenyi stuff. It's also level 7, so you could with Atara go into level 8s. It's not terrible. In theory, you could play like level 11 Synchros if you like. Don't feel like I did want to, and there were too many I wanted to include, so I didn't. Could bump this down to 2 if you like, but I feel like the ratios are fine because you kind of want to start with certain Tenyis in hand. You could put the ratios down a tiny bit and go for Vessel of the Dragon Cycle. Problem with this card is, well, it's a super rare, so I did not want to include it in the deck. Triple Swordsoul Emergence, very important card, gets you any of your Swordsoul monsters, which is nice, but if you control a Synchro monster, you can also add a Wyrm monster instead, which can be helpful, but it's mainly for stuff like Arch Nemesis Protoss. Actually, some kind of decks would utilize this more. There's different variants of this specific deck that you can also play, so in certain scenarios this deck comes even in handy more, but the graveyard effect of it, or if it's the banish effect actually, is not that great. Helps you sometimes to go into other kind of Synchros in theory if you would want to, but not overly great. I run a double Swordsoul Sacred Summit because you have quite a lot of discards, and you could summon a Wyrm monster back. You cannot summon Mare back because it can only be summoned by the effect of a Wyrm monster, so you have to keep this in mind. Can be quite annoying, but you can actually summon a giant pearfish back, for example, which is also not too terrible. And since you have so many discards, it's kind of nice running this card too. Plus, you kind of want to have Swordsoul names so you can banish them off of your Synchro monster's effect. One flawless perfection of the Tenyi. Great field spell because you either have your tokens or you have your Tenyi link monsters. So drawing your 2 cards will be a thing a lot of the time, and your opponent can't really get rid of it because it's not really your game plan. It's just like an addition to it. So actually your opponent has to deal with a lot of different things. So if they actually focus this card because they don't want you to draw 2 cards, then they'll have a bit of a problem. But if they don't focus on getting rid of this card, then you draw 2 cards quite often actually. So I would say this card 1, because it's searchable, is quite nice, and this is the card that searches it, Heavenly Dragon Circle with the graveyard effect. Thing is, this card, you can use both effects the same turn, but you can discard it with the Tenyi 2 link monster, so you can technically use its effect also on your first turn. Most of the time you kind of want to go into different kind of things. You can add Wyrm monsters to your hand, you can special summon Wyrm monsters. Sadly, their effects are negated, otherwise this would be a great searcher for your level 4 Swordsoul monster as well, but the other effect isn't too terrible either. Can get you into certain synchro combos, can add certain cards to your hand, for example, because it's not level 4 restricted, so you could get Strategist, for example, and so on. Send it into the graveyard is also always great, and it's a quick play, so you could use it to dodge out of certain removal and to not lose too much advantage out of it. I run triple Swordsoul Blackout. Great card. In this specific deck, definitely at 3. You could run it at 1 or 2 if you like. I like having the names actually, and being able to banish this card off of certain effects, sending it to the graveyard by discard effects and whatnot, getting the token out is actually quite neat. And in this specific version, I feel like at 3 it's fine, because sometimes you will end on just some Tenyi stuff, and then being able to set this card and still annoy your opponent with it is actually quite neat. Fist of the Unread Tenyi, because you have the token, sometimes it's actually beneficial to leave one token up and maybe not go into your level 10 Synchro monster, especially if you decide to not run Baron. Then this card can be quite nice. Also with the Tenyis it works great, plus it's bait. If it gets destroyed, then at least you can summon out one Tenyi monster, which is also quite neat. If you feel like the deck is still too inconsistent, Pot of Prosperity is actually a very good card in this deck, because a lot of the extra deck stuff you don't really need and will not need, so you could run this instead. There's certain cards like Forbidden Droplet, always nice, can run it. Obviously Mixie, great card if you have it. Other than that, this deck should actually be quite fun to play, and I hope you enjoy it. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all of these things other YouTubers tell you to do, but most importantly, I hope you have a good day.